everybody. I'm Rafael Davis. I am Philosophy and International Studies major here. And shocker, I do not have a visual presentation for you today. But I'm talking today about transitional justice, which I will explain in just a moment, and whether or not that helps improve the peace prospects after war. So, transitional justice, for those of you that don't know, is they're measures designed to address histories of conflict and human rights abuse and violations after countries have gone through civil war or after they've gone through conflict, which, as we define in political science, has been 25 militaristic deaths inside the country per year, and then if it reaches 1,000 within the country, it becomes civil war. That's how we measure it. So, very unfortunate, but so transitional justice just takes many different forms, and all of you have heard of this before. So I think everybody in here has heard of reparations, right? Everybody in here has heard of trials, I hope, right? Maybe some less common ones are amnesties or truth commissions, which is where governments will have third-party actors come in and try to mediate between the people that are causing the conflict and the government, right? Or maybe the government's causing the conflict, but the people that are trying to push for peace, right? So these are all different forms of transitional justice, and what I was really curious about is finding out whether or not they actually promote peace. My favorite, and the one that this project looks at, is museums and memorials, right? So a lot of the literature so far on transitional justice, they measure these single mechanisms by themselves. What I was curious about was, one, counting for museums and memorials as a type of transitional justice, dealing with the memory of conflict, and then also categorizing those as symbolic and material. So I want to ask the question, and feel free, anybody, pop in with an answer. If someone did wrong to you, would you rather them pay you, say they robbed you? Would you rather them pay you some money to replace what they robbed you of? Or would you rather them build you, make you a national holiday? Yeah, no, weird question, right?
Option one.
Option one? You want the money? You want to replace what they took from you? Okay, so this is kind of the theory section of my paper, this kind of theory, right? So essentially what I've argued is that material transitional justice, things that people can actually reach out and touch, should promote peace a lot better than things that they can't, right? A museum that they can walk into that's not actually theirs, right? In order to reduce the chance of conflict happening in the country, again, I strongly believe that you need to improve the living conditions, because that's what's most torn, right? So I took a lot of data. There's something called the Utsalat Conflict Database Program, and it has data of conflicts all over the world. Every country that is part of the United Nations, or that is a signatory, or that participates, they are inside the database, and it counts how many conflicts are happening and when these conflicts are happening all over the world. So I took that, and then I used some GIS to find out where museums and memorials have been built, and then I took something else called the Transitional Justice Collaborative, and I started looking to see when, at what time in history, governments would implement these transitional justice mechanisms, right? To see whether or not these things that are categorized as symbolic and material are actually playing out, that one does better than the other, producing peace. So the way that I categorize these terms, symbolic and material, right? Material you can touch, is something transforming the living conditions of the people that have experienced conflict. Trials are I consider material. They do have a symbolic component, right? Punishment is definitely symbolic and psychological, but also you're removing it has the potential to remove the perpetrator of crime and violence from the situation, right? You don't have to walk on the street and look at the person that burned down the house. And unfortunately, many of these instances have killed family members, have done obscene things to the women and children in the family. This is what is going on in a lot of the instances where we see conflict. And so I also consider amnesties to be just as much material as trials, because they can reintroduce, right? If a victim sees that the criminal is being put back into society, well then there's a chance that those two people or those two groups even can start clashing again. And the other one was Truth Commission. This is a symbolic measure, right? So coming forward and kind of airing out what you remember from the conflict and trying to tell telling what all you remember and what you did. Hopefully, hoping that the government gives you an amnesty, right? And then museums and memorials, right? Building something so that people can walk in, they can see the history of the memory, they can hear the testimonies and hear the voices of the people that suffered, right? So what I found after I compiled all this data and used something called a cost proportional hazard model, some of you may have heard of it as survival analysis. Once I combined all these different things, what I found is that actually neither category does better than the other. Yeah, most of the data was insignificant for the way I categorized them. And so I think there are a couple of interesting things to think about this with, because when I talk to people, and this is the reason I asked the question at the beginning, and I asked them, would you rather somebody give you back what they took you or build you a memorial, 300 miles away you can't always get to it, which is really the case sometimes. And a lot of people answer, they want the money back, and they want their objects back. And so what the data kind of says, it can say a couple of things. One, maybe there needs to be some more data collection to happen. But also, two, maybe our intuitions about what exactly reduces the chances of conflict after a civil war, maybe they're not exactly right. Maybe actually the psychological component of building memorials and museums is as powerful as, say, compensation or giving someone land back that was taken during conflict. The other thing that the data kind of signals is that, maybe there's a problem with the actual reparations that we've looked at, with the actual transitional justice mechanisms. So a government can say, hey, we're going to give you this land back. They can say, hey, we're going to give you compensation. Hey, here's a basic health care package. Here's access to education. But everybody doesn't get it. So in Colombia, there's something called the Victims Law, or Law 1448. I really encourage you to look it up. It's interesting. What has happened is it followed something called the Justice and Peace Law, where basically they were doing agrarian reform. They were giving land back to people that had lost it during the conflict. But what happened was it was going to the men. And it wasn't, and there were a lot of women that had land rights before the war that owned the land, and now they can't get it back. The government would require you to have a title, but after a war, who has a title for their land? The title is, a lot of times the titles have been taken, and then warlords would come and actually take the titles of the land, burn them, and then, well, guess what, now I'm the land, because I said it, right? So they put in this new law called Law 1448, or the Law for Victims and Land Restitution. And essentially, the women were supposed to then be able to go and actually get the land that they owned. But what we saw even after this new law came in was that a lot of women still weren't getting that. Still weren't getting it. So this kind of points to maybe something in the material transitional justice that even though the government said, hey, we're going to do this thing, hey, we've implemented this, the people that needed it didn't get it. Or not all of the people. So that is all I have for you. Does anyone have any questions? Or